It's our day-to-day regime. Thank you all. It's Proclamation, News and Gavins, the prodigious, the prominent professor, working on progressive progression. Every day we come on live. Every day we're trying to reach out to new audience. People coming in, subscribing, sharing. Think first, think safety. Do not enter your vehicle under the influence of alcohol and narcotics. Checking your centre and wing mirrors before acting into safe, sufficient direction of choice. Checking your engine oil and your water coolant tank, making sure they're sufficient. Filled up to maximum level, making sure your PSI limits on your tyres are maximum level. Making sure your tyres not bowled. Checking everyone on board has got safety seatbelts, including babies with seatbelts adapters adjacent to the car seat. Look out for road safety signs. Further police instructions. Just be extra cautious as you enter your vehicle. As you see, many tragic deaths happen via UK roads. Anyway, we're not going to go into the what I usually give you the road incidents throughout today's journalism. But anyway, we're going to go over to the UK politics. Thank you all for tuning in. It's coastal erosion. The forgotten community left to fall off a cliff. Listen to this. Coastal erosion. The forgotten community left to fall off a cliff. Emma Tullett was sitting on the sofa scrolling through YouTube music videos when her home began to fall apart. You see it fall off the edge of the cliff. It's must be disturbing. Imagine that, sitting there watching YouTube channels and all of a sudden your house falls off the side of the cliff. A window blind come crashing down as her partner tried to reattach the fitting. He saw a roof or tree slowly sliding over nearby a cliff edge. He said, "You need to get out." And I think that's when I just lost it a little bit. 42-year-old said she gathered up her four children, throwing coats on her youngest, aged 6 and 8. In a dash of safety, she didn't even have time to put on her shoes. How bad is this? She gathered up her four children, throwing coats over her youngest, aged 6 and 8. In a dash for safety, she didn't even have time to put on her shoes. Over the next 4 days, she watched from a distance as our home, on the Isle of Sheppey in Kent, went over the cliff in stages. The slow process was like torture, she said, and left a strange sense of relief. When the whole thing finally fell on 2nd of June, "I've got nothing," she said. "All we got out was our pyjamas we were wearing." Across England in the next decade, it is estimated that up to 2,000 homes could face a similar fate due to coastal erosion, which is expected to accelerate with the climate change. 1,000 more properties have been protected by the costly coastal defences. So while when some areas saved and others left to fall into the sea, like other communities nationwide, Miss Tullett and her neighbours on the Isle of Sheppey have been told that, simply put, their homes are not worthy saving. The island, relatively soft cliffs made mainly of London clay, have for centuries been slipping into the Thames estuary, opposing internationally renowned fossil deposits. Imagine buying a house on the cliff. Surely they're not obtainable to buy. They must be giving them away. On the north of the island, 124 homes and 1,000 caravans along 4 miles, 6.6 kilometre stretch, are thought to be at risk in the next century. It would cost more than 25 million to protect them all. Engineers employed by Swalbale Council found, with this in mind, the council and the Environment Agency, which are jointly responsible for managing coastal defences in the area, agreed on a policy of no active intervention. Nature will be left to run the course. The financial value of the area at risk does not outweigh the cost to build and maintain the measures required. Residents were told in a letter from the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. Coastal defences such as building a wall of rock to stop waves lapping at the cliff's base are expensive and can have unintended consequences, like harsdening erosion everywhere, said landslide expert Dave Petley, a professor at the University of Sheffield. For smaller communities in general, it is not considered to be worth the damage to the adjacent section of the cliff or the damage of the environment. he added. Imagine that. You're sitting in your living room looking at YouTube and then your house just gets eroded into the estuary. Absolute shock. The lady had to get her kids out, put all their coats on, get them out of the building. Miss Muttley made an offer less than an hour after viewing her dream home. The property, called Cliffhanger, had stunning views and ample space for her children. She paid in cash in August 2018, believing the family would have decades before they need worry about the encroaching cliffs. Erosion is a gradual process, she thought, and by the time her home was at risk, they probably have dumped me in a nursing home. Her neighbour Malcolm Newell moved to Surf Crescent with his wife in 2001, hoping to escape the hustle and bustle of the mainland. Retired, the retired the retired woodturner, 71, said they had enjoyed 16 good years before his wife died. The memories that are here can't be replaced, he said. But by 2015, he became increasingly concerned about his future and began campaigning for action to halt the erosion. Hang on, Q, I'll be with you in a sec, buddy. The battle has been the battle has seen him elected to the East Church Parish Council and come up against an array of public bodies, including the Environmental Agency, Natural England, and Swale Borough Council. He is left feeling that he is and his neighbours are the outcasts of the island, and says we are the forgotten few. You Q, I'll be with you in a bit, buddy. About 10 minutes. The 30 or so homes nestled between two caravans are connected by several unsurfaced rutted roads. Mr. Newell believes the rugged appearance means they are written off by the authorities. We, we get looked on as if we are hillbillies, he said. In 2016, his campaign won a small victory, persuading the council to invest 30,000 into the biodegradable matting that has been tentatively hoped might slow erosion. Hoped might slow erosion. Sorry. The work also required permission from Natural England, which has protected the cliffs as a site of special scientific interest to allow the studies of landslides themselves. Mr. Sheppey MP Gordon Henson told Parliament in 2017, "It was scandalous that in Natural England's eyes, fossils and slumping clay are more important than homes and livelihood of my constituents." Mr. Henderson admitted that there was a Wild West environment along some of the island, who preferred to be free from outside the invention. That doesn't detract from the services we should be providing those people and the protection that they deserve and should be getting, he told BBC. Less than 40 miles away, the East Sussex village of Fairlight provides a very different story. By the late 1980s, several homes in Fairlight Cove had already been lost at the sea and up to 200 more were at risk. Like residents of Surf Crescent, villagers have been told coastal defences would be too expensive after research to the Rotherham District Council, concluding the cost of the works would exceed any benefits. However, local resident Dr. Ruth Cosmin, a government economist who was familiar how to do the low-cost benefit analysis, took a second look at the numbers and found that they were completely out and that the benefits outweighed the costs. Armed with his information, the residents group, now registered charity called the Firelight Preservation Trust, persuaded the district council to submit an application for government funding, and a rock or berm costing 2.7 million was installed in 1960. In the following 25 years, the community twice did successfully put additional defences, with a second berm installed at a cost of 2.7 million in 2017. By the time the third application was made in 2015, the government required partnership funding and residents contributed 150,000 towards the 1.7 million costs, of which 75,000 was paid to the Firelight Parish Council. Alongside personal donations, residents did everything from cream teas to cycle events to raise money. Dr. Cosmin said, "Hope you're enjoying the cars, ladies and gentlemen. It's proclamation of the government. Please make sure you share, subscribe. Looking back on a decade-long fight to protect their homes, Dr. Cosmin said the professional expertise of local residents was absolutely crucial to their success. We had local lawyers. We had people who are their company secretaries. We had people in business. We knew how to deal with government, she said. But Dr. Cosmin believes other communities who lack the same expertise would not be at a disadvantage because, in most cases, the local authority would champion their cause and hire expert consultants. Any invention now would be too late for Miss Tullet and her family, whose future remains uncertain. Decades spent climbing the property ladder have been nothing. We're back to square one, she said. Miss Tullet, who manages a grocery store in Minster, Kent, had owned her own home outright, but with no disrespect of an insurance payout, she now faces monthly rent bills. She wondered why homes can get bought and sold in the area if the authorities know it could only go any minute. Why not compulsory purchase of all property, just say, you're not living here anymore? Ruth Petley believes many homeowners generally understand the risk that they are taking buying a cliff-top property. A high burden is placed on householders' ability to understand whether the house is at risk or not, he said. Imagine that cliff went off a cliff in their sleep. The government has pledged to spend 5.2 billion over the next 6 years to protect households at risk of coastal erosion and flooding. But in areas that don't qualify for publicly funded coastal defences, local councils are responsible for helping people to adapt to the growing threat. While government grants of 6,000 are available to demolished at risk homes, any other financial support is limited and varies from area to area. The prevailing view, and I do not think this is harsh, if you need to recognise that the Cliff City will retreat towards the house and eventually it will implement it. Prof. Petley said, asked if you've been asked what have you been taken to inform residents of the risk and help to adapt. Swale Borough Council said erosion had been a well-known issue along the stretch of the coast in decades, adding that it would be highlighted in surveys when someone buys a property or takes up home insurance. It added it had held a public exhibition in 2013, which explained the justification for the no active intervention policy. Prof. Petley believes a national fund similar to New Zealand's Earthquake Commission is needed to compensate homeowners like Miss Tullet and help others move out of their harm's way. As a country, we've made a decision that we don't support people in this position, he said. If your house is destroyed by coastal erosion or landsliding, essentially, you're on your own. I mean, buying a house on a cliff, knowing that this is a possible risk, um, you know, you're taking a big risk. You might want to ask yourself, am I suffering with mental health? Why would you buy a house on the edge of a cliff? All due respect. Coronavirus in England, high levels, excess deaths. England has the highest levels of excess deaths in Europe between the end of February and the middle of June. Official analysis shows. The official for the National Statistics and said England saw the second highest peak rates of death in Europe after Spain. But England had the longest period where deaths were above average and so overall the highest levels. The INS analysis showed the epidemic in the UK was widely spread than in other countries. However, areas in Spain and Italy were harder to hit than cities in the UK. Analyses that take account of the age of the population also show that England had the highest death rates in Europe. In the weeks to the end of May, Spain was second, followed by Scotland, Belgium, and Wales. An animated guide, what an excess deaths. Any deaths above the expected is known as excess death during the coronavirus pandemic. Many excess deaths can be explained. A number of people were officially confirmed. Well, that's that then, guys. Short news on they were talking about second wave as well, guys. Second wave. I was I come to a bit of a conclusion. I come over a bit of a gimmick on Facebook. It's a true gimmick, not a racist charm because my granddad's from Pakistan, so like Muslim culture. That's all my it's my second bread and butter, if you like. They wear the face covering. Can't think the name of it in a minute, but they wear their face covering, and they've got 200,000 people dead in Pakistan. 200,000 people dead in Pakistan still, and they wear face coverings all the time. every day of their life. They wear it. So why are we so keen on COVID masks? You know, it's true saying, is it? Why are we wearing COVID masks? Everyone's going out wearing a COVID mask, but is it really due necessary? Because there's still 200,000 deaths in Pakistan. And looking at one and all that, there's still more, loads of deaths coming in countries, and they wear their whole face covering. I can't remember the name of it. Coronavirus UK lockdown solidarity starting to fray. Restrictions of lockdown have fostered a new community spirit in Britain, but our signs feelings of solidarity and togetherness are already beginning to fragment and fray. That is the warning from a campaign called Together, which includes NHS charities, media groups and employees among its founders. The organisation helped organise a birthday clap for the health service this month and launched a national public consultation on how to avoid new community divisions opening up, but they expect to be challenging in months ahead. The poll published today suggested people that the country has become less divided since the virus restrictions were imposed. A survey of 2,000 adults by the ICM conducted during the lockdown in May to June found 45% of those questioned thought Britain had never been so divided during their lifetime. A similar poll conducted just before lockdown in March found 60% agreed with the statement. Asked if the country was still too focused on what divides us, the poll findings suggest it fell from 70% agreeing in March down to 61% by the end of May. A similar proportion in the latest survey, 62%, thought people had lost the ability to discuss politics without getting angry or abusive. However, analysis of the polling attitudes data has led warnings that the spirit of unity fostered by the fight against COVID-19 may be dissipating. There's a risk to the past divide, the re-emerging and society starts to reopen, says Jill Butler, Director of Strategy and the think tank British Future and author of Together reports. The shared experience of lockdown made many people feel more connected to their neighbours and local community. Now that sense of togetherness is starting to break. The good news is that people would rather be kept hold of it. Prof. Robert West of University College London, a member of the Behavioural Science Group, which feeds into SAGE, said the level of concern people feel about the virus was easing and was even lower among young people. He said of the level of concern was a key thing, which encouraged people to take the necessary action to protect the community. We need to ramp that back up to the appropriate levels. Professor West told BBC Radio 4 today's programme a lack of direction and communication from the government. It meant the public may not have a clear sense of risk and that they ought to be doing it now. I am personally 100% clear about the government is asking us to do, he said. Professor West said the UK needs to have a strategy such as Scotland's goal of achieving zero COVID policy, so we know we're heading in a particular direction. At the moment, it feels like a lot like we're just drifting, he said. Deep economic uncertainty. Together, the campaign precedes the pandemic, and already have been looking at how to heal the angry divides over Brexit and the political tribalism. Revival of the community spirit exemplified by the clap for carers. During the lockdown, it was seen as an opportunity to cement new neighbourhood level. The campaign helped organise a birthday clap for the NHS on the 5th of July, an event today's ICM poll suggests was attended by 14 million people across Britain, including our PM, Boris Johnson. Prime Minister Boris Johnson is doing a magnificent job, isn't he? Participants were encouraged to raise a couple of glass with neighbours to reflect on the connections that have been made during the lockdown and consider how to strengthen our communities for the next stage of crisis. That process now enters a new phase with the launch of Talk Together, a national conversation the organisers hope it will be the biggest public consultation since CNS. Discussion groups will be held by every region in the UK with an online survey that is expected to attract hundreds of thousands of visitors. The consultation is intended to help the country navigate a peaceful path through is expected to be significant succession. It is forward to today's report. The Bishop of Leeds, Nick Baines, he writes we are entering a period of deep economic uncertainty, one that will heighten existing inequalities and strain our society further still. We must start to disagree better, recognising and respecting our differences while remembering our common humanity and citizenship, with all the mutual obligation that these demands of us. Yo, everybody, thank you for coming through. I'm just doing my journalism this morning. Got about another 10, 15 minutes ago. I'll be with everyone. Thank you all for coming through. Like I say, you should subscribe to Proclamation News and Gatherings, doing a daily upbeat on the front bench politics. PM how public sector works in drive for recruits. Boris Johnson has begun a drive to recruit more teachers, police and NHS staff, highlighting the heroic efforts of public sector workers during the coronavirus crisis. His call comes ahead of the releases of new figures for police in England and Wales and teacher numbers in England. Almost 900,000 public sector workers are to get an above inflation pay rise, but Labour's accused the Tories of letting down the public sector and cutting services to the bone. New figures could provide an update on the government's pledge to recruit 20,000 more police officers over the next 3 years. Critics of the target have pointed out that the extra recruitment would do no more than return officers' numbers to 2010 levels. Spirit of public duty. Speaking ahead of the release out of our figures, Mr. Johnson praised public sector workers as embodying the spirit of public duty that every one of us aspires towards. The fantastic teachers, police officers, and NHS workers truly are the pride of the nation, he added. Under the pay a deal unveiled earlier this month, public workers will receive increase up to 3.1% from existing departmental budgets. But Labour say the Conservatives had frozen public sector pay for 7 years and advises they introduced after the failed to plug the gap. The most recent figures on the police officer numbers in England and Wales from April show around 3,000 extra officers. From the 20,000 pledge that has been recruited so far, forcing England and Wales lost 20,464 officers between March 2010 and March 2019, Home Office figures show. Meanwhile, the government has also announced plans to hire 1,000 more probation officers in England and Wales by the end of the year, with 800 starting training. Supervision of all the offenders on probation in England and Wales is being put back to the public sector, and after a series of failings with the part privatisation of the system. Let down Shadow Chancellor Annalise Dodds said the PM needed to recruit more than public sector workers. Because of coronavirus, governments have cut our public services to the bone. It feels pretty rich for the Prime Minister to talk of valuing the public sector when the COVID-19 crisis has shown historically his government to have let us down. Our NHS and social care workers shared it. More than 300 NHS workers have died in England alone after contracting coronavirus, many doing so while caring for patients. The Prime Minister comments, it came from the NHS bosses, were promising there would be more flexible working, a focus on staff morale and progress on ethnic minority representation in the wake of coronavirus pandemic, and the plans being unveiled by the Health Secretary Matt Hancock later. Former staff will also urged to return to NHS as part of the new recruitment drive, following the example of medics who supported the service during the outbreak. Thank you all for coming through, guys. We've actually come together daily with the Flux News, Proclamation News, and Gatherings. Thank you all. Appreciate you all coming through. Nearly done a first half hour reading of the journalism today. Virus isolation. The virus isolation. More on coronavirus. Miley Cyrus, coronavirus. Here we go. Coronavirus virus isolation period from 7 to 10 days. People who have test positive for coronavirus or show symptoms in the UK must now self-isolate for 10 days rather than 7 days. The change announced by the UK's chief medical officers comes as ministers try to avoid the resurgence of the virus. Until now, those showing key symptoms, a new continuous cough, a temperature of lost taste or smell, have had to self-isolate for the last least a week. The new advice in the line of World Health Organization guidance. Chief Medical Officer said the change is particularly important to protect who have been shielding and in advance of the autumn and winter, when we may say increase community transmission. Evidence shows that people with the COVID-19 have a low but a possibility of infectiousness between 7 and 9 days after falling ill, they said. It comes that the Prime Minister warned of a sign of a second wave in a pandemic in parts of England, speaking on BBC Essex breakfast before the announcement. Health Secretary Matt Hancock said the government wanted to take a precautionary approach and protect people from what wave reaching our shores. There have also been concerns about the several local outbreaks across the UK, including Oldham, Wrexham and Staffordshire. Meanwhile, the government is also expected on Thursday to review the restrictions in Leicester again, a month after the city was put into extended lockdown following the spikes in their cases. UK requirement for the people who test positive or show symptoms to isolate for 7 days was always on the low side. Plenty of other countries require 10 days or even longer. As coronavirus is new, there's still lack of certainty over how long someone remains infectious, which is why there are a variety of approaches. Research suggests that the infection period is just a type of symptoms start to first few days afterwards, but that's what makes mistakes in such difficult virus to contain. But health sector officials say there were enough evidence now to point at low and tangible risk of transmission from 10 days. Even those with mild and moderate illness, this decision from that could have been weeks, even months ago in truth. But officials are describing it as a value judgment based on a variety of reasons. The availability of widespread testing means only those with positively confirmed infection need to continue isolating. Early in the pandemic, the lack of testing meant a blanket approach had been keen, so anyone with symptoms was asked to isolate. It's also about sending an important signal. Levels of infections are now low, but messages are clear. We can't be complacent. Thank you all, Proclamation News and gatherance. Really appreciate your call, all coming through. If you can share with friends, try and build its gatherance all together. I really appreciate it all. I'm working as a lone soldier, independent. It's Proclamation News and gatherance. Thank you all for coming in. Trying to do something similar to the LBC, but more of a fresh from bench politics journal with bona fide conservatism. I'm very, very tired, very drained. The sun's come through. I'm going to enjoy my afternoon. I hope everyone else does. Have a wonderful Thursday afternoon. I'll say one love. God bless. Take care. Hope to see you again soon. Thank you very much for listening.